It was Uncle Nabi who had found this letters of her father. Uncle Nabi was Parvana's older brother, and so he was really Abdullah's step-uncle. Uncle Nabi was a cook and a chauffeur in Kabul. Once a month he drove from Kabul to visit them in Sadbagh, his arrival announced by a staccato of Huns and the hollering of herd of village kids, who chased the big blue car with a tan top and shiny rims. They slapped the fender and windows until it killed the engine, and emerged grinning from the car. Handsome Uncle Nabi, with the long sideburns and wavy black hair combed back from his forehead, dressed in his oversized olive-colored suit, with white dress shirt and brown loafers. Everyone came out to see him because he drove a car, though it belonged to his employer, and because he wore a suit and worked in the big city Kabul. It was on his last visit that Uncle Nabi had told father about the job. The wealthy people he worked for were building an addition to their home, a small guest house in the backyard, complete with a bathroom, separate from the main building, and Uncle Nabi had suggested they hire father, who knew his way around a construction site. He said the job would pay well and take a month to complete, give or take. Father did know his way around a construction site. He had walked in enough of them. As long as Abdullah could remember, father was out searching for work, knocking on doors for a day's labor. He had overheard father one time tell the village elder, Mullah Saqib, "If I had been born an animal, Mullah Sahib, I swear I would have come out a mule." Sometimes father took Abdullah along on his jobs. They had picked apples once in a town that was a full day's walk away from Sadbagh. Abdullah remembered his father mounted on the ladder until sundown, his hunched shoulders, the creased back of his neck burning in the sun, the raw skin of his forearms, his thick fingers twisting and turning apples one at a time. They had made bricks for a mosque in another town. Father had shown Abdullah how to collect the good soil, the deep, lighter colored stuff. They had sifted the dirt together, added straw, and father had patiently taught him how to titrate the water so the mixer didn't turn runny. Over the last year, father had logged stones. He had shoveled dirt, tried his hand at plowing fields. He had worked on a road crew laying down asphalt. Abdullah knew that father blamed himself for Omar. If he had found more work, a better work, he could have bought the baby better winter clothes, heavier blankets, maybe even a proper stove to warm the house. This was what father thought. He hadn't said a word to Abdullah about Omar since the burial, but Abdullah knew. He remembered seeing father once, some days after Omar died, standing alone beneath a giant oak tree. The oak towered over everything in Sadbagh and was the oldest living thing in the village. Father said it wouldn't surprise him if it had witnessed the Emperor Babur marching his army to capture Kabul. He said he had spent half his childhood in the shade of its massive crown or climbing its sweeping boughs. His own father, Abdullah's grandfather, had tied long ropes to one of the thick boughs and suspended a swing, a contraption that had survived countless harsh seasons, and the old man himself. Father said he used to take turns with Parwana and her sister Masuma on the swing when they were all children. But these days, father was always too exhausted from work when Puri pulled on his sleeve and asked him to make a fly on the swing. "Maybe tomorrow, Puri. Just for a while, Baba. Please get up." "Not now, another time." She would give up in the end, release the sleeve, and walk away resigned. Sometimes father's narrow face collapsed in on itself as he watched her go. He would roll over in his cot, then pull up the quilt and shut his weary eyes. Abdullah could not picture that father had once swung a swing. He could not imagine that father had once been a boy like him, a boy carefree, light on his feet, running headlong into the open fields with his playmates. Father whose hands were scarred, whose face was cross-hatched with deep lines of weariness. Father who might as well have been born with shovel in his hand and mud under his nails. They had to sleep in the desert that night. They ate bread and the last of the boiled potatoes Parwana had packed for them. Father made a fire and set a kettle on the flames for tea. Abdullah lay beside the fire, curled beneath the wool blanket behind Pari, the soles of her cold feet pressed against him. Father bent over the flames and lit a cigarette. Abdullah rolled to his back and Pari adjusted, fitting her cheek into that familiar nook beneath his collarbone. He breathed in the coppery smell of desert dust and looked up at the sky, thick with stars, like ice crystals, flashing and flickering. A delicate crescent moon cradled the dim ghostly outline of its full self. Abdullah thought back to 2 winters ago. Everything plunged into darkness, the wind coming in around the door, whistling slow and long and loud, and whistling from every little crack in the ceiling. Outside, the village features obliterated by snow, the nights long and starless, daytime brief, gloomy, the sun rarely out, and then only to make a cameo appearance before it vanished. He remembered Omar's levered cries, then his silence, then father grimly carving a wooden board with a sickle moon, just like the one above them now, pounding the board into the hard ground, burned with frost at the head of the small grave. And now autumn's end was in sight once more. Winter was already lurking around the corner, though neither father nor Parwana spoke about it, as though saying the word might hasten its arrival. "Father," he said. From the other side of the fire, father gave a soft grunt. "Will you allow me to help you? Build the guest house, I mean." Smoke spiraled up from father's cigarette. He was staring off into the darkness. "Father?" Father shifted on the rock where he was seated. "I suppose you could help mix mortar." "I don't know how." "I'll show you. You'll learn." "What about me?" Buddy said. "You," father said slowly. He took a drag of his cigarette and poked at the fire with a stick. Scattered little sparks went dancing up into the blackness. "You will be in charge of the water. Make sure we never go thirsty, because a man can't walk if he is thirsty." Pari was quiet. "Father's right," Abdullah said. He sensed Pari wanted to get her hands dirty, climb down into the mud, and that she was disappointed with the task father had assigned her. "Without you fetching us water, we will never get the guest house built." Father slid the stick beneath the handle of the tea kettle and lifted it from the fire. He set it aside to cool. "I'll tell you what," he said. "You show me you can handle the water job, and I'll find you something else to do." But he tilted up her chin and looked at Abdullah. Her face lit up with a gapped smile. He remembered when she was a baby, when she would sleep atop his chest, and he would open his eyes sometimes in the middle of the night and find her grinning silently at him with this same expression. He was the one raising her. It was true, even though he was still a child himself. 10 years old. When Pari was an infant, it was he she had awakened at night with her squeaks and mutters. He who had walked and bounced her in the dark. He had changed her swelled diapers. He had been the one to give Pari her baths. It wasn't father's job to do. He was a man, and besides, he was always too exhausted from work, and Parwana, already pregnant with Omar, was slow to rouse herself to Pari's needs. She never had the patience or the energy. Thus the care had fallen on Abdullah, but he didn't mind at all. He did it gladly. He loved the fact that he was the one to help her with her first step, to gasp at her first uttered word. This was his purpose, he believed, the reason God had made him, so he would be there to take care of Pari when he took away their mother. "Baba," Pari said, "tell a story." "It's getting late," father said. "Please." Father was a closed-off man by nature. He rarely uttered more than two consecutive sentences at a time. But on occasion, for reasons unknown to Abdullah, something in father unlocked, and stories suddenly came spilling out. Sometimes he had Abdullah and Pari sit raptly before him as Parwana banged pots in the kitchen and told them stories his grandmother had passed on to him when he had been a boy, sending them off to lands populated by sultans and jinns and thieves and dervishes. Other times he made up stories. He made them up on the spot, his tales unmasking a capacity for imagination and dream that always surprised Abdullah. Father never felt more present to Abdullah, more vibrant, revealed, more truthful than when he told his stories, as though the tales were pinholes in his opaque, indestructible world. But Abdullah could tell from the expression on father's face that there would be no story tonight. "It's late," father said again. He lifted the kettle with the ease of the soul draping his shoulders and poured himself a cup of tea. He blew the steam and took a sip, his face glowing orange in the flames. "Time to sleep. Long day tomorrow." Abdullah pulled the blanket over their heads. Underneath he sang into the nape of Pari's neck. "I found a sad little fairy beneath the shade of a paper tree." Pari, already sleepy, sluggishly sang her verse. "I knew a sad little fairy who was blown away by the wind one night." Almost instantly, she was snoring. Abdullah awoke later and found father gone. He sat up in a fright. The fire was all but dead, nothing left of it now but a few crimson speckles of ember. Abdullah's gaze darted left, then right, but his eyes could penetrate nothing in the dark, at once vast and smothering. He felt his face going white, heart sprinting. He cocked his ears, held his breath. "Father?" he whispered. Silence. Panic began to mushroom deep in his chest. He sat perfectly still, his body erect and tense, and listened for a long time. He heard nothing. They were alone, he and Pari, the dark closing in around them. They had been abandoned. Father had abandoned them. Abdullah felt the true vastness of the desert and the world for the first time, how easily a person could lose his way in it. No one to help, no one to show the way. Then a worse thought wormed its way into his head. Father was dead. Someone had slit his throat. Bandits. They had killed him. And now they were closing in on him and Pari, taking their time, releasing it, making a game of it. "Father?" he called out again. His voice thrilled this time. No reply came. "Father?" He called for his father again and again, a claw tightening itself around his windpipe. He lost track of how many times and for how long he called for his father, but no answer came forth from the dark. He pictured faces, hidden in the mountains, bulging from the earth, watching, grinning down at him and Pari with malice. Panic seized him, shriveled up his innards. He began to shiver and knew under his breath. He felt himself on the cusp of screaming. Then footsteps, a shape materialized from the dark. "I thought you had gone," Abdullah said shakily. Father sat down by the remains of the fire. "Where did you go?" "Go to sleep, boy." "You wouldn't leave us. You wouldn't do that, father." Father looked at him, but in the dark his face dissolved into an expression Abdullah couldn't make out. "You're going to wake your sister." "Don't leave us. That's enough for now." Abdullah lay down again, his sister clutched tightly in his arms, his heart battering in his throat.